He paused at the narrow aisle, clutching his boarding pass like proof he belonged. The leather seats stretched ahead, each one holding passengers who shifted, pretending not to stare, though every glance carried judgment. His shoes scuffed softly against the carpet, an uninvited echo in a space built to keep him out. A man in a pressed suit cleared his throat, turning slightly toward the window as if the boy's presence stained the air. A woman with pearls pressed her lips together, her eyes scanning his faded shirt before flicking away. No words yet, only the kind of silence that says more than insult. The boy lowered his head, but not his pride. He breathed slowly, reminding himself that he had done nothing wrong. His father always said, "Dignity is what you hold when the world tries to strip you." He repeated it quietly in his mind, each word a shield. When he reached his seat, the murmurs began, low, uneasy, sharp enough to cut. Someone whispered, "Mistake." Another muttered, "Can't be right." Their voices weren't meant for him, yet each syllable landed heavy, as if the whole cabin had voted him out before he sat down. He placed his bag gently overhead, hands steady though his stomach turned. For a moment he let his eyes meet theirs, 1 row, 2 rows back. They looked away instantly, guilty yet firm in their shared belief that he was trespassing. The seat cushioned beneath him, but it offered no comfort. He straightened, folded his hands, and faced forward. The silence had shifted now, thicker, heavier. He could feel it pressing on him, waiting for the moment when someone would decide his presence was unacceptable. "Excuse me?" Her voice floated in, smooth, almost sweet. The boy lifted his eyes. The attendant stood tall, uniform pressed, her smile practiced, sharp at the edges. "Are you lost?" she asked. Tone dipped in politeness, but the pause afterward carried another meaning. "You shouldn't be here." He shook his head slowly. "No, this is my seat." His words were soft, steady, like he had rehearsed this defense before. She leaned closer, her badge glinting. "First class, sweetheart." "Are you sure?" The way she said sweetheart was not care. It was dismissal wrapped in sugar. A few passengers tilted their heads, waiting, entertained by the tension. One man smirked as though her words had spoken for all of them. The boy held out his boarding pass. She didn't glance at it. Instead, her smile stretched wider, cold. "Maybe you should check again." "Mistakes happen." His throat tightened. I checked. Twice." For a second, the mask slipped from her face. Irritation flickered, then she replaced it with that polished calm, the kind that said power was hers by uniform alone. "Security's right outside," she whispered, low enough that only he could hear. "It'll be easier if you move yourself." Her words sliced deeper than a direct insult. Courtesy made them heavier, the weight of a system pressing down through one person's lips. He swallowed hard, forcing his hands to stay still in his lap. Around him, silence thickened, passengers shifting but saying nothing. The quiet approval of the cabin echoed louder than any shout. The boy's voice, barely above a breath, slipped out. "Why do you think I don't belong?" For the first time, her smile faltered. Just for a moment. The boarding pass shook slightly in his grip, edges bending beneath his fingers. He tried to steady them, whispering something to himself, though the words dissolved before they reached his lips. His silence filled the cabin, a silence heavier than any protest could have been. The attendant's eyes flicked to his trembling hands, then away, pretending not to see what she had caused. Instead, she adjusted her scarf, fixing her appearance as though order itself rested in her posture. A man in the aisle seat coughed, shifting uneasily. His wife tugged his sleeve, whispering, "Don't get involved." Another passenger slid headphones over her ears, too loudly as if drowning out guilt with music. The boy lifted his eyes, searching faces, anyone's. But most looked away, pretending the view outside the window was suddenly more fascinating. Complicity sat thick in the air, the safety of silence shared like a shield. "Sir, please," the attendant repeated, her smile stiffening. "You're holding up others." The words were courteous, but her glance pressed the weight of blame onto him alone. His lips parted, then closed again. He wanted to say something, anything. Yet all that came was a shallow breath, carrying years of lessons. Don't make it worse. Don't give them reason. Another tremor ran through his fingers. He pressed the pass flat against his thigh, gripping hard as though dignity could be anchored in paper. Someone in the back muttered, just loud enough, "Why doesn't he just move?" The boy heard it. Everyone did. No one corrected it. The cruel echo lingered, blending with the drone of the engine. Inside, he felt the ground slipping, but he stayed seated, chest tight, eyes burning, refusing to give her the satisfaction of tears. "First class is reserved," she said again, her tone flat, precise, like a line she'd spoken 100 times. It wasn't a request. It was a verdict, delivered with the weight of law. The boy's eyes lifted, wide but steady. His lips trembled before the words formed, fragile but firm. "This is my seat." He said it quietly, but the sound carried across the cabin, louder than the engines for those listening. Her smile froze. For a breath, she didn't move. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice but making sure the front row could still hear. "Not today, it isn't." The boy's chest tightened. He glanced down at the boarding pass clutched in his hand. His knuckles whitened as he whispered again, almost to himself, "It's mine." The silence that followed was sharp, cutting deeper than any shouting match. Every passenger felt it, though most looked away. A man adjusted his watch. A woman fidgeted with her drink. No one spoke. No one helped. Her face remained calm, but her eyes narrowed, the mask beginning to slip. The boy's refusal, soft, steady, was louder than defiance. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she muttered. His gaze met hers. A quiet stare, no anger, no tears, just truth. That look burned hotter than anything he could have shouted. Someone in the back whispered, "Just let him sit." But the words dissolved into the hush, ignored. The attendant straightened, taking a step back. Her jaw tightened, the smallest crack in her polished control. In that stillness, a shift occurred. Not victory, not defeat. Just an unspoken weight settling on everyone in the cabin. The boy hadn't moved. And in his stillness, he made her unravel. The attendant's hand hovered near his shoulder, not quite touching, but guiding like a silent order. 2 security staff appeared, summoned not by threat but by assumption. The boy rose slowly, boarding pass still clutched, fingers trembling. He did not resist. He did not beg. He only walked. "Sir, we'll need you to step out," one guard said. Polite words, empty of warmth. Passengers shifted in their seats, eyes darting, then retreating. A cough covered discomfort. A phone slid discreetly into recording mode. But no one spoke. No one stopped it. The boy's voice, soft but steady, broke the silence. "I didn't do anything." The attendant's reply came cold, rehearsed. "This is for everyone's comfort." That sentence landed like a verdict. The guards didn't argue. They didn't need to. They simply moved beside him, framing his small frame in their uniforms. He walked down the aisle slowly, each step heavier than the last. Every pair of eyes cut into him, some with disdain, others with pity disguised as silence. His seat, still open, glared back at him, a cruel reminder of the space he had earned but been denied. Narration lingered in the emptiness. His body left the cabin, but his absence stayed behind, filling every corner with unease. A child whispered to her mother, "Why are they taking him?" The mother hushed her quickly, eyes fixed on the window. The boy lowered his head, but his dignity clung to him like a final shield. He left quietly, but the quiet was heavier than any scream, and as the door closed behind him, the cabin exhaled relief it did not deserve. They thought the story had ended. They had no idea what storm was already on its way. He sat in the corner of the lounge, hands folded, eyes lowered, but his silence carried years that weighed heavier than any words. The room hummed with casual chatter, yet inside him echoes rose, louder than the laughter, sharper than the clinking glasses, a voice from memory. "You're smart, for someone like you." A teacher's smile that never reached her eyes. Another, We've decided to move forward with other candidates. His resume untouched, his handshake never taken, and the cruelest one, hallway voices in middle school, whispers dressed as jokes. He doesn't belong here. Wrong face, wrong place. He remembered gripping his backpack tighter then, the same way his hands now clutched the edges of the chair, always holding, never letting go. A security guard in the lounge glanced at him, then away, the way authority often does, seeing, dismissing, deciding without knowing. The boy whispered under his breath, steady but faint, "I've been here before." A woman across the lounge noticed him. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she didn't. Silence again was the choice of the room. Narration seeped through his stillness. Each scar stitched into him had been earned not by violence, but by dismissal. Not by blows, but by absence. Yet those wounds had made him steady, quietly strong, unwilling to bend though the world had tried. The boy adjusted his boarding pass in his pocket, the corners frayed from his grip. He sat straighter, not defiant, but firm. The flashbacks burned, but instead of breaking him, they built a frame he could lean on. The lounge around him moved on as though nothing had happened, yet he knew everything was happening again. This time, he promised himself, it would not end the same. Her shift had barely begun when two passengers in the back whispered, not loud enough for her to hear, but enough for the boy's father to catch fragments. "She's done this before," one said, eyes lowered. "Different faces? Same smirk?" The words cut sharper than the silence. He turned, slow, steady, studying the woman who now avoided his gaze. "Tell me," he said to no one in particular, his voice calm but heavy. "How many boys like mine has she pushed aside before today?" A pause stretched. The attendant stiffened, papers trembling slightly in her hands. Another passenger, older, leaned forward. "I filed a complaint once. Never heard back." His tone was flat, resigned. She snapped too quickly. Procedures were followed. The words rang hollow. The father's eyes didn't move from her. "Procedures," he repeated, quieter, as if tasting the word. Then, after a breath, "Cruelty dressed as procedure." Her colleagues stood frozen, exchanging small glances. One younger attendant lowered her eyes, guilt pressing against her silence. The older woman's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. The father leaned back in his seat. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Every smirk," he said, almost to himself. "Every insult you thought polite. All of it was practice. Until today." The room shifted, passengers sitting taller, silence folding over her authority. She opened her mouth, closed it again. The arrogance she wore so easily now cracked, just slightly. And in that crack, the boy's silence stood taller than her uniform. A cough broke the silence, then a whisper slipped through the air. "Why is he still here?" a man muttered, not realizing how sharp his words sounded in the boy's ears. The boy sat still, hands folded neatly, face calm but tight, like holding his breath without moving. His silence was a shield, though every laugh, every whisper pierced it. "She should have handled that better," a woman murmured from the corner. Another voice, low and sharp, replied, "Better? She's been doing this for years. Nobody stops her." The boy's father caught the fragments. His eyes scanned the room, passengers glancing quickly away whenever his gaze landed. Shame hung heavy, but no one spoke aloud. The boy didn't look up. He felt every stare, each one asking him to bear the weight of their silence. A young man across the aisle leaned to his companion, whispering too loudly, "First class isn't for everyone." The words stabbed, yet the boy didn't flinch. His folded hands pressed tighter together, knuckles whitening. Then, from the back, a trembling voice broke through. "He's just a kid." It was small, almost swallowed by the room, but it cracked the quiet cruelty. Heads turned. The whisperer lowered her eyes quickly, afraid of being seen. The boy finally lifted his head. His gaze swept the lounge, slow and steady. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In his eyes was the weight of everything left unsaid, their complicity, their cowardice, their choice to whisper instead of stand. And in that crowded room, silence grew louder than laughter. A man near the corner shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on the floor. "You know, this isn't the first time," he whispered to no one in particular. His words slipped out like a confession. Another passenger leaned in. "Not the first?" "No, men like him. They've been told not here their whole lives." His voice trembled, as though memory sat heavy on his tongue. The boy's father caught the exchange, his jaw tightening. "Promotions denied. Complaints erased. Doors closed before they opened," he muttered, his tone quiet but sharp, like breaking glass. A woman shook her head, her hands clasped. "Police reports vanish. You file them, they disappear. Families torn apart because the law only protects some. It's always been this way." Silence pressed down harder than before. The boy sat straighter, his calm face carrying the weight of stories older than him, stories passed down, lived, endured. "You think this flight is different?" the father asked softly, eyes scanning the lounge. "This is nothing new. Just another stage, another audience. The script's been the same for generations." No one answered. They shifted in their seats, avoiding his gaze. Their silence wasn't just about now, it was every time they hadn't spoken before. The boy finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "They'll forget tomorrow. Like always." The words hung, cutting through the room sharper than accusation. For a moment it felt as though history itself pressed against the glass windows, heavy and unrelenting, reminding them all that this wasn't about one flight. It was about everything that had been taken before. The sharp sound of shoes striking marble froze the lounge. Every whisper dissolved mid-sentence. Heads turned as the man walked in, unhurried, composed, his silence louder than the crowd's breath. His presence filled the space before his words did. The boy looked up, relief flickering in his eyes, though he stayed still, as if discipline had taught him that movement might be mistaken for guilt. The attendant stiffened. Her voice faltered when she finally spoke. "Sir, can I help you?" His gaze cut to her, steady and unblinking. "You already have." "More than you know." His tone was calm, but each word carried the weight of authority. A passenger whispered, "That's him, the company head." The murmur spread, then died in the silence that followed. The attendant swallowed, her smile strained. "There must be some misunderstanding." He raised a hand, stopping her without raising his voice. "I don't deal in misunderstandings. I deal in facts." His eyes shifted to his son. "And I see the fact of my child being humiliated in front of strangers." Her lips parted, searching for a defense, but nothing came. The boy whispered, "Dad, it's fine." "No," his father said gently but firmly. "Respect is not negotiable." The attendant's mask slipped further, cracks widening in the calm she once wielded. Around them, passengers sat straighter, guilt prickling in their silence. His presence alone shifted the weight of the room. Without raising his tone, without threat, he reminded them all that dignity required no permission. And in that pause, thick, trembling, the arrogance that had ruled minutes ago began to unravel. The room seemed to shrink. Not a word had been spoken, yet the father's silence pressed heavier than any speech could. He stood there, calm, his stillness commanding. Every passenger leaned into that quiet, as if the air itself demanded they witness. The attendant's lips twitched, her practiced smile straining. She cleared her throat, tried again. "Sir, perhaps we can sort this privately." Her voice wavered, softer now, stripped of the sharpness she once wielded. His eyes didn't move from her. Silence again. The boy shifted in his chair, hands folded tightly. His heart pounded, but he stayed still. He had seen his father do this before, win battles without lifting a finger. Passengers exchanged glances. A woman whispered, "She looks nervous." Another man muttered, "About time." Their words, though hushed, carried louder in the vacuum of silence. The attendant's smile finally cracked. I was only following protocol." At last, he spoke, low, steady. Protocol is not an excuse for cruelty. Nothing more, nothing less. Her face flushed. She reached for a defense, but the weight of eyes on her made words stumble. The silence after his statement stretched, and in that stretch, truth settled over the cabin. It wasn't rage that disarmed her. It was composure. It was the quiet insistence that dignity does not shout. It waits, it breathes, it holds. The father didn't raise his voice, yet every passenger felt the sting as if the words had been meant for them too. The cabin wasn't filled with noise, but with shame, thick, undeniable, and shared, and in that silence, the balance of power shifted. She was no longer the one in control. The father's voice cut through the silence, low and deliberate. "You humiliated my son for existing where you thought he didn't belong." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed with a weight that made the entire cabin lean back in their seats. The attendant froze. Her hands trembled as she clutched her clipboard tighter, fingers twitching against the paper. Cameras, small glowing eyes of passengers' phones, lifted quietly, capturing the unraveling. She stammered, I was only enforcing policy." "It's not what you think." The boy shifted uncomfortably, eyes on the floor. He had lived through this script before. Denial, excuses, the rewriting of truth. His father's gaze didn't waver. "Policy does not strip a child of dignity. You did that, and you did it with a smile." Her throat tightened. She tried again. "Sir, please, I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," he said, steady as stone. "Because you believed no one would challenge you. You believed silence was consent." The lounge fell still. No one moved, no one breathed too loud. Every passenger was a witness now, their silence complicit, their phones recording what dignity sounded like when spoken calmly, without rage. The attendant's mask, the same smile she wore like armor, cracked fully. Her voice shrank into a whisper. I was doing my job." The father stepped closer, but not threateningly. He simply stood, unshaken. "Your job is service, not judgment. Today you failed both. No anger, no raised hand, just truth. Truth spoken so quietly it thundered louder than any accusation. And in that moment, her power slipped through trembling fingers while his son sat taller, finally seeing arrogance crumble before dignity. The glow of screens filled the cabin, small rectangles capturing what could no longer be hidden. Passengers whispered as their cameras followed her trembling hands, her faltering words. She tried to steady herself, but every denial only deepened the silence that pressed around her. A passenger near the back murmured, "The world's watching now." Another added, "No more excuses." The words were not loud, but they rippled through the room, reminding her that this moment would not stay contained. The father remained still, his presence steady. He didn't need to push further. The truth had. The room is dim, the curtains drawn against a world that no longer calls her name. The only light comes from the phone in her hand, its glow cutting across her tired face. She scrolls again and again as if messages might suddenly appear. But the inbox remains empty, a blank screen that feels heavier than any courtroom sentence. Her thumb pauses over old conversations. Praise once filled her days. You handled that perfectly. So proud of you. Our star. She reads them like relics, words written to someone she no longer recognizes. She tries to draft a message to an old colleague, then erases it. No one answers anymore. No one will. The silence grows louder than the headlines ever were. She whispers, almost to herself, "It wasn't supposed to end like this." The words vanish into the stillness, unanswered. Her reflection in the black screen stares back, lined, smaller, almost unrecognizable. For the first time, she looks fragile, not powerful. The arrogance that once filled her tone, the confidence in every step, has drained into this quiet exile. Somewhere beyond the closed blinds, life goes on. Planes still take off, passengers still board, attendants still smile. But she is no longer part of that world. The phone buzzes once, her breath catches. Only a spam notification. She almost laughs, but the sound breaks halfway, turning into a dry silence. Loneliness sits with her now, not as punishment from others, but as the final sentence she cannot appeal. The walls hold her secrets, the silence holds her truth, and the phone in her hand holds nothing at all. Already broken through, and the witnesses were multiplying. His son, quiet but upright, finally saw arrogance bend under the weight of its own mask. By nightfall, the footage spread across feeds and headlines. Clips replayed her smile twisting into panic, her voice cracking under calm confrontation. Courtrooms later replayed the same seconds, each angle sharper than the last. Testimonies surfaced, old stories echoing the same prejudice she had thought could stay invisible. Institutions, once protective, began to step away. Official statements sounded cold, detached. "We do not tolerate such behavior." She was no longer defended, no longer untouchable. Her silence, once power, became her undoing. Every attempt to explain was drowned out by the clarity of the video, by the father's single line spoken without anger, yet heavier than a verdict. And so, in public silence, her downfall was sealed. The privilege she wielded collapsed not with a scream, but with a quiet exposure. The world didn't need to rage, it only needed to watch. For the boy, that moment became something larger, proof that dignity, even when quiet, could break the loudest arrogance. The storm of headlines came fast, breaking news banners. Panel debates, carefully worded apologies read into microphones. Her face filled the screens, not with authority now, but with shame captured frame by frame. For days, her name was everywhere. But noise is loud only for a while. When the cameras moved on, a deeper silence began. Calls that once came without pause no longer lit her phone. Messages remained unread. Friends, or those she thought were, excused themselves quietly, too busy, too distant. She noticed the shift most in the small things. Neighbors who crossed the street rather than meet her eyes. Parents at the school gate pulling their children closer. She tried to deny it, rehearsed words into the mirror. It wasn't like that. It was a misunderstanding. But her voice faltered at the edges, thinner each time. Even her reflection seemed unwilling to believe her. Her son's father once asked, "Do you hear it?" She didn't answer, but she knew what he meant. The silence, thicker than headlines, sharper than judgment. It clung to her walls, followed her into rooms, settled into the pauses of every day. The institution she served had long moved forward, speaking of commitment to equality, as if her name had never existed. The world had found new scandals to consume. But she remained caught in the quiet, in the spaces people left around her. That was the punishment she hadn't expected. Not courtrooms or articles, but absence. No defense, no belonging, only the sound of doors closing, one after another, until even her own footsteps felt like echoes in a hollow place. The headlines faded, but the silence never did. The garden was still, the kind of stillness that held weight. A fountain whispered in the background, but the boy's eyes were elsewhere, on his hands, on the memory that still burned. His father sat beside him, calm as ever, not rushing the silence. For a long while, neither spoke. The boy finally broke it. "Why did she hate me? I didn't do anything." His voice cracked, but he kept his gaze low. His father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Sometimes people don't see you. They see the box they've built in their heads. You stepped out of that box." That frightened her. The boy's jaw tightened. "But it felt like I was the one who didn't belong." The father shook his head slowly. "That's the lie. They will try to shrink you, son. They will try to convince you that your seat, your space, your voice doesn't belong. But hear me, your worth is not theirs to give." The boy finally looked up, eyes searching. "Then what do I do when it happens again?" A pause, a deep breath. "You stand. You hold your ground, not by shouting louder, but by refusing to disappear. Dignity is the shield they can't take." The boy's shoulders eased. The lesson wasn't a roar. It was a quiet truth, pressed into him like a seed. They sat in silence again, the garden holding their words. No applause, no crowd. Just father and son, bound by something stronger than the world's cruelty. The boy inhaled, as if for the first time in days, and exhaled the heaviness he carried. The moment did not erase the wound. But it planted something else, an unshakable promise that hope even bruised endures.